Footwear. I get all kinds of questions about what shoes should I wear, should I have orthotics. Having good footwear definitely can prevent you from having an injury. Common ones that I see with exercise, people that are starting exercise, is they get a tendonitis in their Achilles tendon. There's something called plantar fasciitis on the bottom of the foot. That plantar fascia gets inflamed. If you have good footwear, then you can avoid those types of injuries. Make sure you have your foot measured. Oftentimes people come in and they've got a brand new shoe and they say, this just doesn't feel right when I'm exercising. And I'll measure their foot, and either the shoe is too big or it's too small and the toes pressed up against it. So make sure you get your foot measured. Everybody's got one foot that's a little bit bigger than the other too, so you want to make sure your shoes are accommodating that bigger foot. And measure the width of your foot. That gets missed a lot. Everyone's more focused on the length of their foot, but measure the width of your foot. Some people have a narrow foot, some people have a wide foot. There are different widths of shoes that you can get. So New Balance is one, Asics is one. They'll have different widths to accommodate that. The standard shoe is one width. It might not be wide enough for your foot, so get that measured. And then there's different types of feet. So some people have what's called a neutral foot.
Hi, Eric. How are you? Good, how are you?
So in this case, a neutral foot is where your arch is just basically where it should be. It's not flat to the floor, it's not too high off the floor. It's just what we call a neutral. That type of person just needs what's called a stability shoe. So the shoe itself is just designed to give you just a little bit of the support in the arch, maybe some heel cushioning.
How do you put this on?
The next type of person is what's called a high arch. So when you look at your foot, it looks like your arch is really high off the floor. That type of foot is very rigid, so you don't have a lot of flexibility in your foot. So your arch in your foot, so when I say arch, I'm talking inside of your foot here, is actually designed to give a little bit. It acts like a spring, and it absorbs shock. A higher arched foot doesn't have that give to it, so then you get more shock up through your knees and your hips. So we recommend a cushion shoe for that person. So the shoe itself, when you look at the inside, won't have a big thick arch support. It'll actually be very little there because it's trying to let your foot give in a little bit. Mistake I see a lot is everybody goes to a shoe and looks at it and tries to get as much arch support as they can, but you might not need all that arch support. Then there's somebody what we call as a pronator, so they're more of a flat foot person. So when you look at the inside of their arch and standing, their arch looks like it's flat to the floor. That person needs what we call a motion control shoe. So you have a lot of arch support, and it will support their arch when they're exercising. To figure all this out, I've had good luck with people going to the running room because they'll get you to take your shoe off and your sock off and look at you barefoot, watch you walk, and get an idea of which category you are. And then on their wall, they categorize their shoes based on your foot, and then you know where to pick the right shoe. When it comes to orthotics, they're not always necessary. Not everybody needs an orthotic. If you can start with this and find the right shoe for you, oftentimes that will work. But if you have a history of plantar fasciitis on the bottom of the foot, you get a lot of inflammation in your heel. Maybe you've had surgery before in your foot or ankle, history of lots of ankle sprains, then you may want to consider an orthotic to give you some extra support. In order to make sure you're not, your shoe has enough support, I also advise people to write down the date that they bought the shoe. So flip the tongue over when you buy it and just write down the date and keep track of how long you've been using the shoe so that it doesn't lose its support and it's not supporting your foot anymore. And the general rule of thumb is about, if you can track your kilometers, if you're doing like running or a lot of walking, track them, and about 600, 700 kilometers, once that's up, then the shoe's usually lost its support, and then it's a time to replace it. Questions about shoes?
What amount of time is that for the average person?
For the,
That's 600, 800.
But if somebody that's just, maybe goes to the gym 2-3 times a week, doing maybe half hour, 40 workouts, they can probably get a year out of their shoe. But then a person who's training, 4 or 5 times a week and they're putting lots of miles on, then like sometimes these marathon runners, they go through their shoes sometimes 4 to 6 months to replace them. And then I'm going to touch on back injuries. Obviously it's a very specific topic and you can go through all kinds of different areas of it, but I'm just going to kind of touch on some of the key points about avoiding a back injury. Back pain is very common. About 90% of North Americans are going to injure their lower back at some point in their life. I do see it happen in gyms or people that are starting an exercise program, maybe they've done too much. Low back pain can be caused by many different structures in your back. There's nerves there, discs there, muscles, ligaments, so there's lots of things that could cause pain in your back. If you're having back pain, again, talk to a physiotherapist, get screened to find out what is causing your back pain, because if it is a nerve or maybe it's a muscle, there's specific exercises that you can start for your back safely before you get into a full exercise routine. Taking pain medication and bed rest is not a good treatment for back pain. That used to be the treatment for back pain, but these people were shown through studies to get worse. So at one time, if you hurt your back, you were told go home, lay in bed for the next 2 weeks and don't do anything. And then what would happen is the person would get even more stiff, all their muscles would basically waste away, and then they'd be actually worse off than they were before. So a lot of the research now is showing that if you've been screened by a professional and it's safe for you to do exercise, then movement is the best thing you can do. So if you just try to keep moving, if you were running before, obviously you can't just go out and try to run, but you can walk or maybe get in a pool and just try to keep your body moving. Core stabilizers. This is a muscle that's or a term that gets thrown around a lot when people are talking about the core. Some people think of just your abdominal muscles. Some are thinking more of the bigger back muscles, but when we talk of the core stabilizers of your spine, one muscle, it's called your transverse abdominis. It's the deepest muscle in your abdomen. So if you have your abs here, if you cut them away, there's actually one muscle deep that wraps all the way around and attaches to your spine. So it's like your body's own corset. And when it contracts, it actually stabilizes your spine. That's one key stabilizer of your spine. The other, it's called your multifidus. So there's little muscles, we call them like Christmas tree muscles, that connect each bone in your back together. And they're basically designed to hold each vertebrae together. Those are the two key stabilizers. Those muscles should be a focus of your back exercises to try to prevent a back injury. Doing sit-ups does not work those muscles. That works the bigger abdominal muscles that move your spine and move your body, but they're not designed to stabilize your spine. So you should even, if you're doing sit-ups, I would even just stop doing sit-ups, because they work these bigger muscles, they work muscles in your hip that pull on your spine, and they can cause a back injury. To this day, the Canadian military still does sit-ups for their military members. They get somebody standing on the person's foot and they have to do as many sit-ups as they can in 60 seconds. I used to be a fitness instructor for the Canadian Armed Forces, and we had to call the ambulance to the base gym twice because somebody's herniated a disc in their back. But it's sort of like an old way, and they just kind of keep doing it. The U.S. Army is getting away from that now, and they're getting into more of these stabilization type exercises in their training.